Welcome to the 141st episode of Show Me the Crypto. This week we chat with Karel Vuong, who is the co-founder of Treasure, which is a decentralized gaming platform. Essentially, the decentralized Nintendo is what they're trying to be. Alf, what was your takeaways from this conversation?
There's lots of takeaways. I mean, chatting with Karel was fun just because I got to talk about video games and crypto in one conversation.
It's your two favorite things.
Two of my favorite things. So, but for real, getting into Karel's background, how he got into the space, what led him into video games, his love for StarCraft, his thoughts around Diablo as a Web3 game and how that could work. I mean, we talked about some really cool things historically, but then also talking about the future and how does this technology really work. We dived into more of the philosophical side around, how will blockchain impact gaming? How will in-game economies work when it's associated with real money and assets that gamers truly own? So we talked about some really interesting stuff on that side, as well as just all about the Treasure ecosystem, the Treasure platform, and what that looks like as well.
Yeah, they made a big jump earlier in the year, the DAO voting to move from Arbitrum to ZKsync. So Karel jumped into that. He talked about all sorts of things. Toward the end of the conversation, you're going to want to listen to the whole thing, because at the end, we start to talk about this current bull run that's happening, or that we're on the brink of. We're recording this on Tuesday, November 5th. Price of Bitcoin is hovering right around that $69,000. Karel gives his information of, does he think we're on the brink of a bull run? If so, what is going to be the major trend to keep an eye out for? A ton of value jam-packed into this episode. We hope you enjoy.
Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by fellow Canadian Karel Vuong, co-founder of Treasure, which is striving to build the decentralized Nintendo. Karel is a lifelong gamer whose passion blossomed while waiting for games to download on LimeWire in the early days of dial-up internet. With a priority on building, Karel dropped out in his third year of computer science at the University of Toronto, but his early love for gaming, eagerness to build, and background in venture capital has led him to the forefront of Web3 gaming innovation. Treasure's goal is to bring games and IP born out of Web3 into the mainstream. Karel, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Great to be here.
Excited to have you on. So considering going back to your background of waiting for those games to load on LimeWire in the early days, if you could take a game out of that era and then bring it into the Web3 space, what game would it be, and how would you reimagine it with blockchain tech?
Oh man, that's a big one. So the one that I vividly remember staying up for, and hopefully I don't get in trouble for this, but it was Diablo, right? And eventually I went out to the Best Buy and they bought it. So just don't
Blizzard's coming after you.
But I mean, it was one of the games I grew up on, Diablo 1, 2, and I just remember being on dial-up internet and telling everybody not to hop on the phone and interrupt that. So, and it was like something that just took forever. It was like ages and ages of just waiting for that to finish. So it would probably be that one. And, we've had, of course, iterations of that, and something that, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's very much like in that action RPG kind of genre. It's, one of those games where you have to grind to get an item, and they're very rare. It takes forever to get them. And so They actually had something similar that, if like you think about the parallels to Web3 gaming today, so much of it is around assets and being able to like own them, and, there's scarcity to it. You know how many exist in the world. And so they had this thing back in Diablo 3, which had its pros and cons, which was the auction house. And so you could actually sell items that you found in the game. And, to some, it was a blessing. To others, it was, it almost felt like, you're cheating the system. Right. And so, I think there's a big part of that I feel is going to come back, especially when we think about having economies in games that are truly player driven, and you kind of up that ante and take it to a whole nother level where as you bring more of that on chain, I think there is some degree of inherent financialization that is part of the space. And I see it as a feature. It's not a bug, it's something that I think we accept. And so I would take that. And I think there's a big emphasis right now on, can you bring an entire MMORPG on chain? And so I think there's something to be said of like full economies being brought in game, full ability to kind of compose and build upon existing games. And part of the whole Blizzard, I think their early arc before, arguably, I think things got sell, at least in my mind, was that there's so much of this of like early days StarCraft, which I also grew up on. There's so much about like modding and kind of remixing and creating custom forms of these experiences that eventually would turn into titles like Dota, looking at kind of Warcraft and League of Legends, and that sort of spawned a genre. And so I think there's parts of all of those experiences that I see Web3 being able to create when we think about, user-generated content, remixing, building on top of game formats, and things that really, I think right now happen in a sanctioned way. But when we sort of bring in the blockchain into the mix, anybody can do that. Anyone can build on top of that, and anyone can take their assets away and have other people, other games, other experiences interface with all of those things. So I think there's a lot of beauty and a lot of breathing space, for anyone, a creator or a builder, to be able to take those building blocks and create a masterpiece of it.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to getting into more discussions around just like everything that blockchain can offer the world of gaming and the ramifications of that and the challenges as well. But before we get into all of that deeper conversation, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your history. And I'm curious how you got started in blockchain to begin with. How did you first sort of stumble upon it and then get involved, and what eventually led to founding Treasure?
Yeah, so you captured it initially. I mean, I'm a lifelong gamer, and so part of this was always wanting to do something in this space. And as we sort of went through my journey of being at the University of Toronto, I was studying computer science. I was also just like, I wanted to build cool stuff and build things that people would want, would use, and would make a difference. But for me, it was kind of a struggle because it was very academic, it was very theoretical. And there is the other side, which ties in with me being a gamer. I probably spent way too much time playing StarCraft 2. And so it's like borderline, not so competitive in there, but, it's just, it was an obsession. And so I think tying those two things together, for me, it made sense to kind of jump out of that seat. And so, I landed just doing a bunch of startups, working in Toronto and Waterloo. Waterloo is very important in the story into crypto, so I'll get there, but also the Bay Area as well. But it all really wrapped around this whole thing of like, I just wanted to build really cool stuff. And so kind of back maybe 6 years or so, I before Treasure, I had started as one of the first employees, kind of working with a prominent family here in Canada. They had a ton of different assets that they were working on and kind of incubating. But it was, there's a startup studio, there's a venture fund, private, equity, et cetera, et cetera. And so I sort of jumped in, in the seat of building and incubating companies from the ground up. And this is all within kind of financial services, which has an adjacency to crypto as well. And so I was involved in maybe 3 or so initially, had 3 really great exits, 1 IPO to, got acquired. And that was, so taking, that craft of like building products and then just like kind of building and incubating companies from there. And sort of from there, I moved into more of the venture side of things. And, this sort of took a turn to also looking at just the types of investments that we were making in. And over time, that started to shift into more crypto. There is more Web3 exposure. But again, it was very much in the tune of like, the evolution of what fintech would look like. And then I sort of moved into, when you think about fundraising, often it's in the context of like startups and companies, but you also have to fundraise for the funds that invest in them. And so I moved over to that side and it felt like it wasn't the right move for me. And I had always wanted to come back into the arena again. And, at that time, right before Treasure, we were in the midst of launching a crypto fund or a digital assets fund. I think it was kind of that moment that sparks the right pathway for me to just go, full on and dive headfirst into the space. I had throughout that entire time frame, I had read the Bitcoin white paper. I had, was more adjacent to everything, and just more on a personal and not professional basis of being here. So I think like a lot of people, I was actively, trading. It was my evenings and weekends just working on side projects. And eventually that overtook what I wanted to really spend most of my time in. And I started anon, although not very anon. I was just 0x Karel. And so it was pretty easy to point back to me. When I was in Waterloo, this was around the time of some of the early kind of optimism folks and many of the other folks who were kind of diving into that space. And so I had a really great front row seat to a lot of the things that were kind of happening. I remember that they have a hackathon at the University of Waterloo called Hack the North. And so, there's Vitalik and there's, all these great speakers and folks that were kind of exposing a lot of the space and what was kind of happening here. And so there's a lot of this like energy that goes back into kind of this like full circle moment for me of like, there's so much opportunity and it's very much like a meritocracy. It doesn't really matter where you come from, how old you are. There's you guys had Matt Katz on here from Caldera, and I mean, I think there's so much like youth energy that I think just people that we end up interacting with and working with, it's crazy just how much that kind of comes into the space. And so all walks of life, you can be anon, you can come from anywhere and sort of make it and build something great. And so that was really my foray into starting and having this life in crypto.
Love that. Karel, one of the things we like to do is make our content as unintimidating to people as possible. So whether you're brand new to the space, whether you're experienced, hopefully it's not too confusing, like the tech side of things. And Treasure, considering it's a decentralized gaming platform, from a really basic level, for those who are maybe brand new to the space, what does that mean? How is that different from traditional gaming platforms?
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned decentralized Nintendo initially, and or the decentralized game console, as we also like to say as well. So it's not a physical console. We don't have one yet. That's a very hard business, but maybe we'll get there at some point. But ultimately, we see this as a new way of doing things, from a gaming perspective. When we think about building games and having studios and partners and builders who are creating those experiences, I think we also see a shift of, this the role that players have in a system like this, where they're not just consumers, but they're also priciers. They're producing and consuming at the same time. And then there's also this kind of wrapping around all of that, where, for us, in some ways, we're a game publisher as a platform. And so really what we want to create and enable is a system and a network that has all these different parties that are contributing to it, building it together with us. And ultimately, what we hope to do is form, this next wave of a powerhouse around entertainment that is, kind of bottom up, that is community driven, that we can kind of share in a lot of the value that we're creating together. And so tangibly within Treasure, we do have the blockchain side of it as well, of course. And so, we're a layer 2 blockchain, on Ethereum. And so, with that comes a really big focus on our community and being able to do all of this with them. We have a very big focus on independent games or indie games. And there's a big debate I'm sure we'll get into of AAA versus indie, and we're very much firmly on that side of the spectrum. And then there's also the tech that we're creating as a platform that anybody can build on top of and create really great gaming and consumer experiences with all of that. So having all of that come together, and within Treasure, we have about 10 games right now, a few more that we haven't announced yet. But some of those games include folks like The Beacon and Small Bounds, Wanderers, who we recently announced as well. And all of this makes up the world of Treasure.
And while we're talking about sort of the tech and crypto side of things, one of the key components is the magic token. What's the role of the token in the ecosystem, and how does that sort of incentivize gamers or developers or any other role that provides?
Yeah. So as it stands, right now, the magic token is used, really as the store of value and collateral within the ecosystem. It's used within throughout all of the games. It's the thing that unifies everything together. And, it also goes back to our early start of Treasure, which was very much launched as, it was a fair launch, it was a free mint project. And, that also meant that we were kind of decentralized and bottom up from the very beginning. And so in order for us to create all of this, there was a degree of building and leveraging this token as a way to kind of bootstrap the ecosystem and kind of create value from that. And so there was ongoing kind of missions to the community that allowed for other builders and other game developers to come in and build on top of Magic as well. And outside of that, so as we head into the chain, this is where the role of Magic is also going to change as well. So with the introduction of our chain, it's going to be the native gas token. So everything happening on the Treasure chain will require Magic in some way, shape, or form. And then we'll also have the ability for it to effectively help to secure and power up this game console with all of the different parts of infrastructure that will be part of this. So whether that is from a data availability perspective or other aspects of decentralized infrastructure that our game developers are using or other builders are using, and that all goes back into ultimately just powering everything up. And so it takes a very central role across everything from the consumer experience all the way through to the builder and also the investor side of things as well.
My understanding was that Treasure DAO had a vote whether or not to move to the ZKsync ecosystem in favor of Arbitrum, and it was 99.5% in favor of that. So what were the strategic reasons for that proposal, and why do you think ultimately it was voted through?
Yeah. And that's a good point as well. One very important aspect of the Magic token is the governance feature of it as well. And so To answer your question, this was, and it goes back to, I think, our history of, having been around since, late 2021. We moved to Arbitrum, I want to say around October, November of 2021. And really that was, back then, I mean, early days of Arbitrum. We were probably one of the first projects to kind of make a big dent when it came to just consumer crypto, like NFTs, games. It was very much non-existent over there. And so, I think for us, like we went through a pretty big assessment back then of, picking the right place for all of this. It was not feasible to do anything gaming related on L1. It was far too expensive. It would have been terrible for everybody, and we needed to scale. So Arbitrum was the pick for us, and we thought that it was the only option back then that was realistic. So we went head on and made it happen there. Over that time frame, I mean, I think we spent a lot of time just building and heads down with our games, and really, I think, ultimately made treasured this home of so much gaming traction and activity, and built up a really strong community. And so as we made that transition to effectively like establishing ourselves as an app ecosystem on the generalized purpose blockchain, it made sense for the next chapter for us to take that and move to a sovereign network where we could effectively own and manage more of the stack and customize it to how we wanted to be able to tailor make something that was really built for gaming. And so we announced this back in December or late 2023 that we were launching a chain. And so we were kind of courted by a number of players in the space of, hey, you should come and use OP Stack or Arbitrum Orbit or ZK Stack. And so there was no shortage of options, I think. And ultimately it came down for us. There's a tech component, there's a scalability component, which I think is really important to stress, given what the ZK kind of side of things can enable. So that was a big part of the decision for us. And then I think there's also a focus on consumer. That I think is, I think we need to think about things in a more opinionated way as to the types of experiences that we want to enable, especially if you want to bring crypto to the mainstream. There have been a lot of innovations and work being done on just like account abstraction, just, getting rid of the wallet through MetaMask, not having to install one, and you just start using and playing and enjoying yourselves within the rails that are here. And so when we look at ZKsync, really, I think those things really stood out for us. It was tech, it was focus, it was the culture that they were beginning to form. And, I think for us, it's like they're arguably way earlier in their journey. Our Arbitrum has a year and a half, maybe 2 head start on them. But I think there's a lot for us to be able to do together to really make what we want to create, which is the best home for games and consumer crypto. And, that's going to happen on, within the ZKsync world. And there's many players out there as well that are doing that.
Speaking more to just gaming and blockchain, more from maybe the gamer side of things, for those who are looking to build a game on blockchain with blockchain tech, is the only purpose, it's going to be some sort of functionality or features that blockchain provides that you can't otherwise do traditionally. Does that mean games that are always online? And I say that because, with blockchain, you think about, well, something's going to be recorded to a ledger so that it always exists indefinitely, or whether that's an asset or maybe a high score or something along those lines. But if it's always online, in some respect, gamers historically, many of them have had lots of issue with not being able to play their games. on their time, if they're offline, if they don't have an internet connection. Do you think that is a hurdle, or is that not how it works? And am I understanding that perhaps wrong? And maybe that's not such a big issue going forward.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's definitely a movement to everything being perpetually online. And I think most games are on that side of things now for sure. I think I also empathize and feel the same pains of just connectivity issues, right? And I do like my locally stored. I just want to buy a game and play it, and I don't care about the multiplayer experience. I just want to go single player. I do think it depends on the type of game though, and especially in Web3, like there are certainly experiences that can be kind of formed like in a kind of offline setting. But that said, though, I think in order to, as you said, commit it to the ledger that is the blockchain, you have to have some form of connectivity back into it. And so I think it does impact also the the types of game formats and the overall game design to have that baked into just the overall core of what the experience looks like, which is also why I think we're generally pretty we're super bullish on people who integrate Web3 and blockchain like from the very start of what they're building versus tack it on afterwards as more of an afterthought. And so there's definitely a bit of that shift that I think is happening. But let's see that more as an enabler or a superpower that we're adding on versus kind of deficiency.
So with that being said, it sort of, obviously only some types of games, genres of games are the best fits for building a blockchain game versus a, just a traditional game. You're probably not going to see single player, no sort of leaderboard or asset owning type of game that really can take advantage of blockchain unless the developer thinks outside the box to say, how can I take advantage of this? So what are the most popular games that we're seeing being built on blockchain today? And what do you want to see that maybe you haven't seen a lot of, or you haven't seen at all yet, that you think would be really cool to see built as a blockchain game?
Yeah. Great question. I think there's what we've seen, and it ties into, I guess, the main, value props of Web3 games. If I can maybe quickly sum that up, I think there's a big emphasis on asset ownership, which has a lot of things attached to it. It's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. There's that inherent financialization that is part of it. I think there's a big part around interoperability as well. And so when we think about being able to, there's the forever meme of taking your sword from one game to another. How that actually looks like in practice is very difficult, but I think it's still a dream that where everyone is working up towards. There is a degree of composability as well. So the whole Lego piece thing, everyone can build on top of it and use it however you want. And so when we sort of look at, I guess, the space of games, I think what we've seen, and whether or not it's the right play, and I think one would argue that we probably haven't seen the genre really take off yet. I think we're still so early in the space that no one has proven it out quite yet. And it's just the fact that, great games take time. And so, I think we're heading up on this point now where the great games that have been building are finally about to launch. And so I think for me, there is a degree of some form of collecting ability that whether it's a trading card game or a deck builder type games, or, I mentioned the MMO genre as well. Those are notoriously really difficult to build. And so I think there is that element though that ties in with that form of collectability that naturally, translates really well to NFTs, and, that degree of like scarcity, rarity, having all these things kind of tie into it. I'd argue, I think, there's a need for IP to break out for, someone to want to collect something, right? And so I think there's that emotional tie that needs to be formed. And a lot of that does tie into, well, having either an established IP come into the space that really uses this technology. I think that everyone has been talking about the Pokemon, trading card game on mobile. And so imagine if that was on blockchain. I think that would be an insane evolution and a natural transition for that type of game to be here. Something else I think we've seen, and I mentioned the MMR, which is, I think there is a competitive component to this. As you said, leaderboards or some form of multiplayer that allows for, that to kind of really shine through. And I think naturally, a lot of people are here because they are risk takers. And so I think there is a element of really leading into that. Some might say, whether it's degen or it's just very risk on, that we haven't necessarily seen those formats come alive yet. But I think that as a general model of building and types of games that can kind of come out of that. And you might apply some analogs to that kind of system. But I think we'll start to see more of that as this form of evolution in the spaces as well. I think for me, what I would love to see, and this is just going back to more nostalgia than anything, is I'd love to see some form of RTS in the space, more so because I love them. I don't think it'll do well though, because RTSs have just been, have been crashing across the board. But I mean, this just goes back to my early StarCraft days.
If you had to throw a time frame prediction around it, what would that look like? And the reason I ask is, you mentioned earlier, part of the decision to move to the ZKsync ecosystem is that goal of trying to bring mass adoption into this space. But it feels like we've been talking about on-chain gaming for quite a while. When Ulf and I first started this podcast 4 years ago, that was one of the earliest topics because it made sense with NFTs of, oh yeah, this interoperability, you can move it from game to game. Obviously, there's a lot of technicalities that go into that, but we've seen quite a bit of resistance from the gaming community. Do you think it's going to be that one mainstream game that comes in and then all of a sudden that brings in the masses? And if so, what's an actual time frame if you had to crystal ball gaze on it?
Yeah. Gaming, I think, has always been hits driven. And, you have far more losers than there are winners in the space. And so with that, you kind of need a lot of hits on target to, try to make that work. And so I think there's definitely a time component of just, having had proper developers, people who, and tying that with people who truly understand the space, that I think we're starting to see come into the arena with, what they've been building for some time and now ready to go to market. You've seen a game like Off the Grid, for example, and I think as a title that, I think firmly falls in that AAA kind of category, and we've seen, of course, drop off as most games do, after the initial launch week. But, I think there's things of that nature that, you sort of need these hits that come out of it. For us, when we look at the indie category, I think it's really, it's interesting when you look at the Steam charts and what is sort of dominating, between that mix of, call it AAA versus indie. And I think it does tie into being able to serve up an experience that, in some ways, doesn't feel Web3, but is, and what I mean by that is more from a accessibility perspective. I think there is and we're now at a point where things have become a bit more commoditized when it comes to the tech and infra that can enable that degree of abstraction, which I think is important, so the UX is a lot more accessible for anyone to come in with. But then outside of that, though, I think there is a element of like education that we need to kind of beat back some of the stigma that has plagued, I think, crypto gaming in the past, more so from a degree of it's all a scam. People are here just to make money. It's very extractive. That I think it's part of that re-education in a way, and by kind of showcasing what is really great about the space, which is all the things that we kind of talked about. And so if I were to prescribe a time frame for that, I think we're probably a year to two out, honestly, before we see a game that can start to make headway into the space. I think we're seeing a lot more acceptance from maybe a platform perspective. Epic and them beginning to list like blockchain games. I think a lot of the payments rails are starting to come alive as well to allow for people to come in and participate in what they're used to, microtransactions, like stuff of that nature. And then for all these games who again have been cooking and now they're ready to kind of serve the main course.
That's exciting. That means these games that are being worked on right now and are, not too far from the finish line could be one of those games. So I hope you're right, because it does seem like it's been a long time coming. So it'll be exciting to see a blockchain game that really blows up and takes to the masses. And on that note, you were mentioning Steam charts and Epic games, and I'm not totally familiar myself, but like how does it work so you're a game developer, you build a Web3 blockchain game and you publish it with Treasure. Is it only accessible through people who come to Treasure to find the game, or can that be found on Steam? Can that be found on the Epic Games launcher? How does that part work to allow the masses to find it, not just those who are actively looking for Web3 games?
Yeah. So it's accessible anywhere. Depends on where they choose to publish it. But if you're a mobile game, a number of ours are in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. And the same thing for Steam and Epic. Treasure will have a desktop launcher. And it is, I think, part of just having arguably a native and like tight-knit experience of being able to serve up like the best experience for players that, again, like, I think there's certain restrictions, certain things that you just can't do in the Steam or Epic context. And it's also why, a lot of people have been installing like PWAs on their, devices, or, kind of side loading, as it stands, just to be able to unlock some of those things. But really it's, we don't believe, at least at Treasure, like, you should be where the people are. You shouldn't be restricted to needing to use the Treasure launcher. I think it should just be a de facto offering and solution where it's like, it just makes sense because we can do so much more with this, or the people that we're bringing in. It's going to give you a much better experience as a player, and also as a developer. And so I think there's a lot around like monetization, or a lot around there's the kind of app store taxes that you often have to pay. And so being able to have and create the experience that you want to create and give that to the players, I think, is important. And so having that choice is something that our developers will always have. Whether they're in Treasure, they're choosing to launch and deploy their games here, or they're across multiple chains. It's important to have that choice.
Something you touched on was the sort of in-game economies and the financialization of games by, after utilizing blockchain and implementing things like the ability to own assets or buy or sell in game, or you have a marketplace. And I'm curious how that will for the games that do end up taking off, when they do go mainstream, when we've got millions of players in these games and they have those in-game economies, will that alone totally transform how players play games and why they're playing them in the first place? Will it potentially ruin games, or will that be something that potentially just doesn't work and it needs to change and evolve over time, because players aren't playing the game to enjoy the game, they're playing the game to make money. They turn it into a job. They're grinding for gear because they want to sell it because it's worth real money now. Like, at what point does that sort of ruin the gaming experience, even if it's popular? Because something like that could still get popular, but it might not be true to what makes, a good game kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that's interesting even a philosophical kind of debate as well as to whether or not it's right for that to happen. I think it depends on your vantage point, if you take a maybe like Western, almost like North American look at it, I think a lot of us sort of, play games in the way that we traditionally kind of understand them. It's not about money, but at the same time, you look at maybe some emerging markets where this is in some ways like a great equalizer for them to be able to come out of, and for a lot of them, why they're in crypto as well, where, it's much more realistic for them to be able to engage in this kind of like digital network and economy and, take that back to where they are. And so I think games can also be a conduit to make that happen as well, especially in this space. So I think we're going to see things that won't work as much until they actually happen. And I mean, you even sort of look at the early days of like play to earn 2021, like it certainly was not sustainable. But I think with the right iterations and, improvements, the tinkering that needs to happen in order to create sustainability out of that, I think it does represent an opportunity for us if we figure it out to be able to, in some ways, like invent a new way of engaging in these experiences where there is, a inherent financialization, and that's okay for some games, and that's probably not okay for other games. And, I think it is ultimately up to the choice of the player to be able to opt in to whether or not they want that experience. Or you go off and play another game. I think it's not so binary of that choice as well. And then there are also some approaches that we've seen games take where if you did just want to play the game without engaging in that side of the experience, you're certainly free to as well. So, I think with that general short shelf life that games have, I think there is an opportunity for all of these things to coexist in harmony versus, kind of take away from each other.
We're recording this on Tuesday, November 5th. Many are feeling like we're on the brink of a big surge, possible bull market coming up. Bitcoin's hovering around $68,000 US. I'm curious what your feelings are, if you agree with that, like we're on the verge of the bull market really breaking out. And if so, what do you think will be a dominant trend to keep an eye on this time around? It seems like every bull market has its trend. If we go back to 2021, NFTs were a major focus, and that brought in a lot of attention into the space. What do you see as being this bull market's trend? But before that, are you in agreement that we're kind of on the brink of it? Obviously not financial advice.
Yeah, not financial advice. Yeah, I was afraid we're on election day as well, so I was afraid
there's a lot going on. Yeah,
but I would agree, and I mean, I think part of this is looking at the cyclic nature of things, and I think often, I mean, certainly around this time of the year and the lead up to December and on. I mean, I think there's a lot of that buildup, and I think you zoom out far enough there, I think like we're generally very long and bullish on the space as a whole. I think after this Bitcoin, we might see a bit of kind of rockiness, but I think it'll eventually settle. And so when we sort of look at the catalyst, like hard to predict. I mean, I think most of, as you said, the waves have kind of started with some form of cultural change in terms of what could be built or could be unlocked from a like consumer perspective. I think the last maybe like mini cycle was very much around meme coins. I think we're seeing a lot of movement on taking that and then applying an AI like spin to it. And so I think it's a bit of a lot of the catalysts coming together around like decentralized computes, capabilities from an AI perspective, a lot of the kind of agent frameworks that have been kind of forming. And we're excited a lot about that as well, because there's a lot of applications from a gaming perspective. And so how do you abstract that, because there's so many other use cases. And so I think for me, that is probably what is going to spark maybe a bit of the next wave. Whether or not that is the full return to the bull market, I don't know. But I think it's something to watch out for sure.
Karel, this has been an awesome conversation. We like to end every episode of Show Me the Crypto with the same 3 questions we ask every single guest. It's a segment we call You Had Me at Crypto. Ulf is going to ask you those questions.
All right, Karel, you ready?
I think so.
All right, the first question. Who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
Oh, man. I wish I could share many names, and partially because it's there's a lot of talented and knowledgeable people out there, and they provide a lot of different perspectives. I think if there is one person I could pick, though, probably be Andy from the Rollup, because of, I think, one, his rise just as a whole, from being able to unpack, especially everything going on within the Ethereum ecosystem and the modular thesis that is playing out. And he's got some really great takes, and had the pleasure of speaking with him recently as well. But everything when it comes to ultimately, as you said, bringing the mainstream into the space, I think we're seeing that transition to abstraction, to app chains, and ultimately people are not interfacing with chains and infrastructure; they're interfacing with apps and games. And so I think he brings really great, refreshing takes on all that.
Love it. Second question: what will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from today?
Let me pull it up really quickly.
Do some math.
We're actually 69,000.
Look at that.
Okay.
A lot can change in the hour recording.
Yeah. Well, not financial advice again. So I mean, I rounded up to 70K or so right now. I mean, I think if we look at the thesis around Bitcoin, I mean, the analog being digital gold, but I think it's more than that. I could see a world where this is, 7 figures down the track. I think if we take market cap of what gold is, I think it's like 10 times or so what Bitcoin is today. But let's go with that. 700K.
Cool.
Which is $1 million Canadian, basically. So I love it.
Exactly. Let's round it up there. Yeah.
All right. The third and final question. What is the most underrated project in crypto?
Oh, man.
Other than treasure,
right?
Other than treasure.
No treasure. We know that.
Yeah, I want to say, you know what? I think I will have to pay homage to the ZKsync ecosystem and the ZK token. Partially because, I think there was, as a lot of these ecosystems tend to do, there's that initial wave of farming. And so there's been a good flush out of that since then. But I also think there's a lot of opportunity, not just like as a layer 2 token that certainly has like the governance role associated to it, but I think there's a very real pathway for a more comprehensive, form of utility to take place within everything that is playing out there. And so you have really great chains, and that's ultimately being powered by the protocol and everything that they're creating there. So chains like Treasure, folks like Abstract, the Pudgy Penguin guys over there, Sophon, Exola, a lot of these, I think, very differentiated, consumer-focused ecosystems. Lens, I'll throw in there from a social perspective. All of that is being built on top of ZKsync. And so I think, if I were to bet on someone to come out ahead after, maybe coming from behind, it's probably going to be done.
It's always an honor to have a fellow Canadian on the podcast. We haven't had too many episodes with fellow Canadians. So Karel, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Thanks so much, Wade. Ulf, really good to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.